order. Mary, roll please.
Artser. Here. Cloyd. Howard.
Here.
Redlin. Showalter.
Here. Everybody please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I think we'll turn it over to Steve and we'll take a step out here. Yep, right there. Okay. Do you want the baby with you or do you we take it out?
Whatever you prefer. So is it on?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'll take about 30 minutes and leave time for questions, but you can stop me with questions at any time. My name is Steve Fellmeyer. I'm retired CFO from Koch Industries. I worked for Koch for about 30 years as CFO. Retired a couple of years ago. The last couple of years while I was there, I was working as CFO, but also helped the family, the Koch family, with their philanthropy and thinking about, gaps in the community. And one of those was affordable housing. So I have spent the last 4 years studying affordable housing, understanding why very little of it exists, understanding what the barriers are, why there's problems with that, and also trying to understand what's going on the construction cost side, because that's a big part of the problem. In Wichita, what we learned is that for affordable housing, there's probably 25,000 homes needed today. That there's a gap of that number, which would be probably 100,000 across the state. And that's for the population that's roughly at or below the poverty line. Poverty line's about 17%, so in Wichita, that's about 25,000 households. And if you look at what's called the Section 8 waiting list, a couple of the ways that people get into affordable housing is one is Section 8, which is a program which gives you a voucher that HUD sponsors. And there's 15,000 people on that waiting list to get a voucher. The voucher would typically be for $400 or $500. Would go to a single family mom or father, say with a couple of kids. And if they could afford $800 worth of rent based on their income, but the market rates for that family would be $1,300 for an apartment complex, that's the $500 differential. Or Section 42 is a program the federal government runs that helps people develop and build multifamily apartment complexes. Roughly 22% of all the apartment complexes in the United States have been built off this program in the last 20 years. And that's a different kind of subsidy. That requires the investor and the developer to cap the rents. And in exchange for capping the rents, they're giving a bunch of federal tax credits that they can claim on their federal tax return. And that's really the source of their return. So that's the way the world thinks about affordable housing. They think it's a government program, and they've given up that the market can solve the problem. They've given up, builders have given up, that they can do affordable houses. In the last 20 years, there's been nobody building affordable houses because they just don't think they can afford to do it and they can't make money. And many of these builders, in Wichita, for example, at one point there was 200 builders pulling building permits back in 2003. By 2023, that number declined to 20. And the reason why is because they just don't feel, I interviewed them all, they don't think they can make enough money or any money. Because the price point on a single family home in the affordable range needs to be about $150,000. If it's not $150,000, then nobody's income is going to be able to defease the payment, or you won't be able to make the payment necessary for the rent, or if you try to own it, you're not going to be able to make the mortgage payment. Most certainly, you're not going to be able to come up with the down payment. And that's in the affordable space. And I'm sure you have the same issue here. We've looked at demographics. We'll show you, the trends in your supply of housing that's come into Goodland in the last 40 years, and it's dropped dramatically, especially in the last 20 years, as I'm sure you already know. The next problem is in the starter home market. What you want is for folks to have a place to go for affordable housing, but not to be there forever. Nobody wants to be there forever. Everybody aspires to move up into better housing over time. But today, the housing is unattainable. For the last 6 decades across the United States, the average age of the first-time home buyer was 28 years old. In the last 6 years, that number has climbed to age 41. You know, I bought my first house when I was 22, and I can't imagine how my life would have been different had I had to wait till I was age 41. You know, it's not just about the economics you give up because you're not participating in that mortgage getting paid down and you're not participating in that appreciation of that house. It's the fact that you're not responsible and accountable for maintaining your own home. And to me, it just changes the way this country evolved. And so the lack of starter homes or the ability to afford them is equally startling to us, to me. And when you look at the source of the problem, I've already alluded to it, it's builders that just don't think they can make the numbers work. You know, and most builders today in Wichita, but across the state, because we've been traveling the state, believe you need to at least be at $300,000 or roughly $250 a square foot to make the numbers pencil out. So I started a fund to at least start remodeling houses in Wichita, and we raised about $15 million, a lot from banks, that enabled me to make low interest loans to people that were going to start doing affordable housing. And we've been remodeling about 150 homes. We're well into using a good part of that fund. And out of that came a learning of how expensive it is to build. And we started looking for better ways. You know, in the last 18 years, to drive home this point, the construction costs have tripled over the last 18 years. They're doubling about every 6 to 7 years. The price just to pour a foundation to create a basement, if you want a basement, you're looking at $50,000 to $60,000 now. That's the cost of concrete. You know, by the time you excavate, you lay up the walls, you pour the concrete, you take the walls back down after you've cured, you waterproof, you backfill, you put in, you know, the subsurface you need for irrigation or to move water away from the house, the aggregate, etc. Waterproof it, put in stairs, all that, you're $60,000, $70,000, and it's completely unaffordable. That's what's driving and that's one example. The price of land in most places have gone up 250% in the last 10 years. It doesn't appear there's any end in sight. And so how do we roll the clock back and how do we make a difference? So that's when I started looking for new construction methods and ran across a factory of a couple in Tulsa that started building modular homes. And what I learned that's different about modular that was not necessarily the case 20, 30 years ago. Today, modular means high quality, better than a stick-built house. The only thing different about building a home in a factory and bringing it to the site versus building it at the site is where the point of attachment is to the foundation. It's at the end of the building process versus the beginning. But because you're building in a factory, you have chances to improve the quality dramatically, all while you're reducing the cost. So we can build for about $100 a square foot less than what you can build for if you're stick building. And I'm going to just get it. And I have a worksheet that I would show you. In fact, we have slides that everybody can take away that shows you the source of this $100, but it's really very simple. It's 5 things. One, I don't have to pay subcontractors. I don't have to pay them to travel here because they come to the factory. These are our employees. And they build there. So they're not we're not marking up their costs by 15 to 18%, which is what subcontractors mark up. Second, I don't have a general contractor because we are the general contractor in the factory, and so I'm not marking up another 15%. So these two markups alone are compounded and equal 33 to 35%. Third, because I'm building in a factory, I can do it with less raw materials, even though we often add more raw materials in certain places to strengthen it because I simply have less waste. If you're a stick builder on premise and you typically have a 40-yard dumpster for construction waste, that'll get dumped 4 times during the construction process versus we will fill a dumpster 1/8 during the entire construction period because we're using precision. Everything's precision cut, precision done. One example is in the framing process. So we have a machine that we begin our process with. It's an automated machine. This technology didn't exist 10 years ago. It exists now. And we tell the machine, here's what we want you to cut tonight. So we'll preload it with 2x4s, 4x4s, 2x6s, whatever dimensions are needed. And you come in the next morning, if you told them you wanted to cut our 3-bedroom, whatever the house is, you come in the next morning and it'll be completely pre-cut and labeled, so the framing crew only has to erect it. And that's an example of where we save not only waste, but also labor hours. So we can build for about 50% of the hours. And then finally, we can build in a month versus 18 months. And so we don't have to pay construction period interest, which adds about $10 to $12 per square foot. And most importantly, at the end of the day, if we can build for $100 a square foot, we're not trying to capture that margin back. We are doing this with a non-for-profit mentality because we just need to do something different here. And part of what drives all of our employees and the people that are here is we just want to prove, to the extent we can, that there is a different way to do this, a different model where the quality is there and the costs can be taken out. And we're passing that back to the consumer. We are starting this in Valley Center, Kansas with the starter home development. We have 30 lots. It's been approved. The typical home in that market that would be a comparable that's stick built would be $275,000 to $300,000, and we are going to market those homes for $190,000. That'll cover the depreciation we have in the plant applicable to each house. Our goal is not to make money. We want to prove that the market cares, that the price matters, and that people are not waiting until age 41 because they want to, but because they have no other choice, and we're trying to create that choice for them. If you are trying to qualify for a $300,000 house mortgage, you need about $75,000 of income. If it's $200,000, you need $50,000 of income. So it's a 50% difference between $50,000 and $75,000 of income required if you are buying a $300,000 versus $200,000 house, and these are the same square footage. So look, can you roll forward to the slides that show some of the images? I want to talk about the quality of what we're doing. A lot of information here, including the costs. So these are what we call attainable models. These are the homes that are our starter homes. And the attainable models are roughly the same as the more affordable ones that you would see on the prior slide, except we've integrated 2-car garages because a starter home absolutely has to have garages and 2-car garages. We've integrated a mudroom or utility room so that the washer and dryers can be a separate utility room versus in our more affordable model, they're in a hallway closet stacked. We've left room and we will put in place tornado shelters. It's a 6x6 shelter that is bolted into the back of the garage. It withstands F1 tornadoes, 300-mile-per-hour winds. They work best when the homeowner doesn't fill those things with junk in advance, which is what typically might happen. But they're actually much safer than even being in a basement. Sometimes when we present to city councils like this, and I had one feisty gentleman who's like, yeah, but I want a basement. I'm like, okay, well, why? What's going on here? Well, it wasn't about the tornado shelter. He wanted a place for the kids to go play. I'm like, okay, what's wrong with outside or in the living room? And he's like, I want the basement. And I'm like, so you want the square footage? And I'm like, I could add an extra 800 square feet for the same price as that basement. How about I just build you a bigger house? It's going to appraise better. It's going to be more functional. And he just wanted a basement. So we weren't going to win that argument. But these houses are beautiful in our estimation, but they're buildable. For example, the modules, it might be easier to see on the one on the bottom right. The actual house is built in the factory is the portion of the house that's running widthwise. And so the back half is one module, the front half is another module. Those get shipped on a forklift. The forklift actually puts them onto a slab, or excuse me, onto a stem wall. becomes a permanent part of the real estate, permanent part of the foundation. And the house is actually seamed and waterproofed within 4 hours on the foundation and looks like that. The garage is shipped as a kit because to provide the stability for shipping, typically you want it to be 4 walls. In the case of a garage, you really only have 2 walls because the garage door itself is not a wall. And then the wall that adjoins the house is already a part of the house. So that would come out as a kit and that would get built on site. Yeah. And you know, I love the one at the bottom. It's just a beautiful rendering and one that's going to be very popular. That's a 3-2. So the key in Wichita in our factory is we've invested about $20 million to build this factory. That's not all my money. In fact, very little of that was. Most of it came from other people that are investing here that are like-minded. Our landlord spent about $8 million building the factory itself, which we're renting. We spent about $5 million to modify the facility to make it fit to build these homes. And then we have about $6 or $7 million more in working capital to make sure we can build the homes and have the capital in the inventory in place to actually keep this train moving. When it's an affordable customer, typically it's going to be a not-for-profit that is like, it could be like Habitat for Humanity, or it could be a hospital. You know, Wichita's getting a new mental health hospital. And what's really important at this particular hospital is mental health is, it's, you know, in this case, it's not the straitjackets you remember from 100 years ago in the movies. This is about addiction. It's about drug addiction and alcohol addiction and other addiction. And this hospital is going to be a specialist at that kind of addiction treatment. But the treatment doesn't end when somebody goes to the hospital and leaves in 2 weeks. It lasts for another year where that person is getting aftercare, which typically means you are in a controlled environment in some type of transitional housing close by the hospital where there's treatment and continuing care and where they help you with the housing, get stable, get a job, and within a year, the recidivism rates decline by about 90%. So we'll build homes for them next to that hospital, and that's the not-for-profit. In that case, they'll prepay us for the houses. I don't have to have as much working capital. But to keep the plant full, we needed to also have the starter home market. But in that case, I am the developer. I am the one that's going to be taking the houses out to the market, and we won't recover our costs until that day there's a closing statement. And so for that, we needed quite a bit of additional capital to be able to fund that. In Valley Center, as I said earlier, in Kansas, we're going to be going into a market like that with 30 homes, and I think we'll be selling them quite quickly. We're seeing huge demand across the state. And it was predicted when I was in Topeka talking to the lieutenant governor. At the time, and this was nearly a year ago, there were some incentives that the state offered for a business starting up like this. And one of them was job training dollars. We've hired a lot of second chance employees. We think the second chance employees are fantastic employees because if you get the right ones, the ones that have actually kind of whipped the problem that got them in trouble in the first place and they're not coming out of the justice system, if you take a chance on them and you train them, their loyalty to you is off the chart. We're paying them $25 an hour, right? And so the fact that you've taken a chance on them, you've trained them, you've helped them, they're going to be there loyal and not just going off to the next job after they've been trained. But to get them trained required about a $500,000 investment. And so I was talking to the Lieutenant Governor because we knew he had a discretionary fund to attract new business. And we went and saw him, and I said, look, Lieutenant Governor, I know the largest check you've ever written was $100,000 in this area. I'd like you to write a check to us for $250,000, but I'm not going to lie to you and tell you we're not going to build this business if you don't. That's the way the game's usually played. You know, we're not coming unless you do this for us first. I just don't want to be out there by myself, you know, pushing and trying to solve this problem, or at least create another opportunity to try to show people there could be a solution. and just don't leave me hanging. So he writes the check for $250,000. But he had only one request, and he said, look, I'm from Iola, Kansas. We need this so bad, but no matter where I go, because he's also acts as the Department of Commerce secretary. And he sees every community he goes to that has a chance to attract new business. You know, for example, I know you have the same thing here. You've got your bakery coming. There's potentially going to be a tire recycling plant and other things coming. We're aware of all of that. But without the workforce housing, they're going to continue to shrink. And that's what's happening across Kansas. And it's not just a brain drain out of Western Kansas because people don't want to farm. That's not it at all. I mean, that's part of it, but it's really driven by the lack of housing stock throughout the state. So he said, the one thing I want you to do is go out and see these cities. Goodland, to be honest with you, probably wasn't going to be my first stop. Why is that? Because it's 5 hours from Wichita. Okay, it's just that simple. But I started thinking about it, and I know Connor Hampton, whose father-in-law lives here. He doesn't want that admitted, but he's here. Connor's deeply ingrained in the community, and Connor's a close friend of mine, and he's very like-minded. And he said we should go try this in Goodland, because if you do it in Goodland, that people are going to take notice across the state that this worked 5 hours away. So that's number one. And number two, I kind of like a challenge. And I recognize that for you, I grew up in Denver, and before I moved to Wichita 45 years ago. And I know how expensive the trades are to come out of Denver to come to do work here, and that's not, your number one choice to get subcontractors. But when you got to do it, it's extremely expensive. And I've heard what the starter home prices can be here. They're crazy. Yet despite that, your valuations of houses are actually quite low because the housing stock is quite low here. And why don't we move to some of those slides now, Kent? This shows you some of that data. As I said, there's a lot of other information here about us, about our capabilities, why we're doing this. But this is some of the demographics for Sherman County. You can see, that going back to I guess the Great Depression earlier, you had 782 homes, and then it builds up from the bottom up by decade, the number of new houses, their building permits that were pulled. And it's shockingly low when you look at what's happened since the turn of the century 26 years ago. You've added less than 100 homes, which is equal to about 3% of your total housing base. If you go to the next slide, you can see how you stack up against some adjoining counties that relates to household median income. And those numbers are actually pretty good. The affordability levels aren't bad there, but the median house value is super low for the reasons that I just described. And the reason for that is just for a lack of new supply. And as a result of that, when the housing values are that low, the rents are that low, and when the rents are that low, nobody's going to come build, because the developer, that's the price signal the developer needs to know they're going to lose a lot of money if they come here and try to do something for rent or for sale, because it's just too expensive. We were just touring a couple of houses. Most of you probably know them, that are over on the west side of town, I think. And, they're being marketed for $300,000. It's a tough pill to swallow. They're beautiful homes, but not surprised that they're not moving at that price. And so what is the answer? The answer is to get that shingle out there at $190 for the exact same equivalent stuff. And that's partly how you get to this problem. So next. It just shows, so that some of the vacancy rates have actually declined because there is some demand, but again, it's not moving those income numbers or those valuation numbers up. Next. So, what we're proposing is to take the land that is behind and adjacent to the senior living, topside, which has already been designated as an RHID, and to continue with that project in a different way, but we would come as the builder to basically begin building on this plot. This is our plot that we've worked with PEC on recently. PC is an engineering firm out of Wichita. They do most of the municipal work across the state, including here, I guess, in the past. And this was what they've come up with. This can be changed or varied if the city had specific requests or there was other specifics that required that change. But that's an example of what we would do. The reason why I think the RHID is so important, and for those of you who don't know what RHID, it stands for Rural Housing Investment District, and it acts as a way to reduce risk for everybody involved. And so it takes the tax revenues that would come, much like tax increment financing or STAR bond, that are used throughout the state and other places. It takes those incremental revenues, in this case property taxes, and it pays back the bonds that are issued to basically put the utilities in place and the streets in place so that this could then be turned into lots that are developable. We don't know what that cost is in this case, but if you held a gun to our head, we would say it's probably going to be about $1.5 million for the engineering. And that's rounded to the nearest $12 million. That's a joke. Probably about $1.5 million. And our guesses are usually pretty good on this stuff. We know where the utilities kind of start and stop here. We know what has to be done. You never know about stormwater issues or things like that till you really get into the project, but that's probably the number. But if the problem is, if you're trying to build affordable and you're trying to build starter homes, which we would probably put a mix of both here, when you have a monthly add-on, which is the specials that the homeowner actually will ultimately incur, so that $1.5 million could result in an additional $200 to $300 monthly payment, you start to defeat the purpose, right? And so the goal here is not to enrich us because because we don't want to put in the $1.5 million. It's about pushing that value down to make sure that this program works by looking at it holistically. If you go to the next slide, this is a very conservative estimate of the kind of tax revenues that kind of unit development might generate. And you can see over on the right that there's 78 units there, and we've assumed that none happen in year one. We actually think we could get that, and that's because year one, well, we're just being conservative. I mean, year one really starts when the engineering work is done. And the beauty for us, most developers think, well, we're not going to be able to have the house done for 18 months, so it won't be in the tax base till really beginning of year 3. We'll be rolling these things out every 30 days because we have the capability in this plant to actually be building 36 houses at a time, finishing about 6 per month, up to 10 per month once the staff gets fully engaged. But here, we've assumed we are only selling 10 in year 2, 10 in year 3, 10 in year 4, and then so on. But even with that, you end up with tax revenues over this 25-year window of about $6.8 million. And so we think this thing pays back much quicker than 25 years. Typically, in most RHIDs, it depends on the cost, it depends on how many lots, depends on the property tax rate, but it's usually 12 or 13 years, okay? And so the beauty of this is that the city, and I've seen this, many different things that different cities are doing. And the city of Kingman, Kansas, for example, they finished an RHID a number of years ago. They have lots, they have the utilities are all in, and they're like, come get it. And so it's paid for. We don't want you to pay for the land. We just want the development. We're looking at Mineola, Kansas. They said, we would prefer that you would put in the utilities and that you pay us $15,000 per lot. We said, look, it's kind of defeating the purpose. How about you finish the streets and the utilities, and we'll pay you like half that for the lot. It just depends. Each situation is different. It depends on how comfortable the local government is, depends on how badly they need the housing, and it depends on the situation for the school district. I believe that the school district typically can still be funded. In this particular case, the RHAD doesn't even have to be funded until the beginning of year 5 at the end of year 4. That's when funding actually starts to pay back these bonds. I think we get a big head start because the housing gets done quickly, and then you actually start generating tax revenues well before those first payments are actually required. So you'd have to model out whatever you're comfortable with and what you think it looks like, but this is a conservative estimate of what we thought it looked like. Next slide. So what we're proposing is that we together go work with PEC and put together a public-private partnership to go work on this land. We'll commit to pricing levels that are what I've already described. We'll commit, and I just did this with Valley Center, because their city council is most worried about what happens if you do this and then the homeowner wants to profit off of this and then go sell it to people that's going to turn this into a rental situation again. And I'm like, we'll deed restrict that in the first 5 years, if a homeowner sells and there's a gain, that half that money has to go to the Valley Center Community Foundation. The executive director of the foundation thought that was a great idea. I think it's important that we have that kind of a hook. And then one of their council members, well, what if this person really, really needs it? And something bad happened and we'd want them to, it's like, fine. This is at our discretion. We could say, we're going to relieve that on this particular deal. But at a minimum, we'll have that hook in there so that people can't do that. And we'll have a hook where we won't allow rentals if that's something that people are concerned about. Next slide. So we think that there's 2 steps here. The first step is to do a preliminary plot with PEC. And this is where they will come up with the engineering estimates to fine tune that $1.5 million number I threw out there. That's typically a $75,000 range. Sometimes the city absorbs that, sometimes the developer does. What I'm proposing is that we would split that cost with you. I'm also proposing that you would change one thing that is in your subdivision regulations that you may not even realize is there because there's not been a lot of development. Typically, to get to a final plot, you're not required to have construction drawings, final construction drawings, because that's like a $300,000 additional cost. And we propose that be deferred until we actually have the final plot done before those costs are incurred. At that point, those costs would be absorbed by the RHID at any rate, but that's just to avoid, in this first phase, getting $300,000 into the project and then finding a rock that causes you or us or anybody else not to want to go forward. We know the land pretty well. We think it's pretty flat, which is a good starting point. And other features of that land, like the utilities being brought to it pretty closely, are really important. In fact, there's already a street adjoined just to the north of the senior living, and we could actually start putting houses right along that street right away as part of this program if we wanted to do that, and you wanted us to do that. So that's what we're proposing. What I hear quite often is that when communities have adopted these RHIDs, they're just waiting for the right developer to come along, and they're waiting for somebody that is right for them. In the city of Goddard, which is a suburb of Wichita, they were a little skeptical, and they had a developer come in and just want more and more and more and more and more in the form of stacked subsidies and stacked incentives. And they finally just said, you're killing us, we're done, we're not doing the project. Well, in that case, he did it anyway, which basically told the city council they were right because he didn't need all those incentives. He said he needed it or he wouldn't go forward because he went forward anyway, right? We need an RHID to go forward here. It's already in place, but we need you to want to go forward with us. we're gonna want to have some additional incentives, like working with the foundation, a local foundation. The one cost that's gonna be more than normal is shipping. To get from Tulsa to Wichita is about $11,000 with one of these modules. We're not gonna incur that kind of a cost because we now own our own Peterbilts. This was my ultimate goal in life, was to own a Peterbilt. I now have one. I haven't been in the cab yet, but I will one day. I will tell you that even the best truck drivers, though, are not capable of backing it into our factory without hitting the sidewall. That happened on the very first night. But if we do get credit, it's to help us with additional incentives. It's to help us defease costs like that. Because at the end of the day, if we have these extra costs, then that $100,000 per house they were trying to save and put back into the buyer of these homes, so you get young families in here that can afford to buy these houses, that we're not just chipping away against that savings we've created because we have a new way to go build these homes. So I will stop there. I said take about 30 minutes. I've taken just slightly more than that, and try to answer any questions that you have. Now, as I said before, this PowerPoint's available. It's about 35 slides, a lot more information than that. I would tell you that if you want to come see these homes, we can show them. We have them in Wichita. We didn't bring one with us today. That would have been too hard. But we've got model homes at the factory. Excuse me?
You have a Peterbilt?
No, I should have brought it. You're right. Shame on me. We actually did purchase 5 of them from this affiliate in Tulsa. I own 28% of that plant. They're going to own a small part of the Wichita plant. We're independent yet affiliated, and we bought 5 homes from them because when the plant opened this month, we now have our CO and we're starting to build. We have a ribbon cutting June 25th, but I wanted the model homes available so that people could see them because the interest level is very high right now. But people want to see it, but I also wanted them to see some installed on us at a real site. So about a year ago, we brought up 5 homes because I wanted to figure out all the things I didn't understand about placing a modular home on a lot. We learned a lot from that, but we also learned it was very possible, and that the community loved the product. They loved the inside of the houses the most. They are beautiful, elegant design homes. The CEO in Tulsa is a lady, and I think that's really important here because Amanda has this eye for the kind of home that preserves dignity and respect, even when it's the most affordable home. You know, you can go on Amazon and go buy an affordable house. They're 200 square feet. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about homes that are 800, 900, 1,500 square feet that actually have the kind of square footage I grew up in. You know, I was the oldest of 5 and grew up in a 1,000 square foot house. I loved it. It was my own single family house where we sat down at the table for dinner every night. So that's what we're proposing.
I apologize if I missed this, but do we have to commit to the 78 houses, or is there like a trial period where we could do like 6, see how they move, and then move on from there?
Yes. In fact, we're proposing to try to put 2 or 3 houses up here right away.
Right north of top side?
Well, we could do it there, or we could just go find other lots. Part of, who are we working with today?
Jennifer.
Jennifer, yeah, Gigi.
Yeah.
I was told, Gigi. She wants to work with us to find other lots. Maybe they're her lots or other lots.
Mm-hmm.
And she had Nate,
Lennon, yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
with us, and he'll help us with that too. So we can go test that.
Okay.
But in the meantime, if we did get PEC started in the interest of time, the commitment level would be $37.5 for both of us each, so that PEC can go do the work, so that we know that we really are looking at $1.5 million. And because in our opinion, if it is $1.5 million, that is a very doable project and one that's very economic.
Thank you.
So So in this $190,000, is all the concrete work and everything for the house, the foundation, driveway, sidewalk, all included in that, or is that hidden cost afterwards?
No, and that's a great question, because I have learned that the costs that occur outside of the factory can be quite large. And, you know, we can build, and I'm very transparent about the numbers. When you see the actual slides, we skipped over it. Why don't you go back to it real quick, Ken, because this is critical. In fact,
Back to you.
this is kind of like our competitive advantage, this slide I'm gonna show you. But I want everybody to see it. Because, for example, even in Wichita, if I'm building 300 or 400 houses a year, that's a dent. You know, in the state of Kansas needs 200,000 affordable or starter homes. So even if I'm building 1,000 out of 200,000, I welcome all competitors. I will give them the roadmap. Here you go, take it, go do it. We need more factories to get caught up. But this is the secret sauce. So if you look at on-site, I'm showing you exactly what the costs are. And you can see site costs, which is the basis for your question, are typically $95,000. It's the cost of the land. I don't think we're gonna be at 22,000 here, so that's gonna be a savings. PCH is us, Prime Craftsman Homes, and the variance is the money we save. So you can see on the average home is $236 a square foot. That's $307,000. That's for a 1,300 square foot home, which I've noted up in the parentheses up there in the title. And so my costs inside the factory are, to build the house itself, are about $84 a square foot. If you go right here, the $84 square foot versus $143. At the site, I'm not building a basement, and so I am saving about $22 a square foot. But I have other costs like delivery costs. And then at the end of the day, I'm adding a storm shelter that the stick builder doesn't have to build. And then I have overhead. And I have to add that overhead on. That's the one disadvantage I have, is because I have a factory, I have to have I have a CFO, I have an HR leader, I have a head of operations, I have a team. And I have to pay rent. I have a great landlord who cut me a deal, but I still got to pay them rent, and I have to pay insurance. So for me, those costs are going to be about $3 million a year, the overhead. If I'm only building 50 homes a year, I have to add on about $60 a square foot. But if I'm building 4 or 5 times that number, here's 200. And at the time I did this slide, I was estimating that our overhead was about $2.5 million. It's probably $2.5 million. But if I'm building 200 homes a year, that number drops from 50 down to $10 a square foot, because I'm amortizing that overhead over more units. And so I have a disadvantage, but the advantage is the disadvantage becomes much smaller when I'm building more homes. So for me, I have to keep the factory full. That's partly why I started up the starter home segment, because I control my own destiny much more in that versus working with not-for-profits who will be our first priority, but not-for-profits, they don't have the money always available. It's available when they get a grant or when they fundraise, and then we'll work with them. But the more steady part of this is going to be the starter homes. But to answer your question, this is a fully loaded cost, including all the site costs that occurred at the site.
And these are in the leave behind that we'll share.
Yeah.
Take up.
No tricks, no gimmicks, just, I was happy to retire, but I have a lot left in me. So that's what this is all about. Okay, Thanks for listening, for getting everybody here today. Appreciate it very much.
Okay. Well, appreciate, everybody's comments. Kent, did you have anything else that you wanted to wrap up with?
No, just thank the folks that came and presented and be able to have some, when we have more questions, we know who to contact and get additional answers.
Okay. Thank you.
You want to close the meeting?
Second.
By Sarah, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Jerry, you are adjourned.
You guys want to know?
Let's do that.
Oh, will we?
Kent might be the best.
Yeah, Kent would be the best to answer.
You're welcome.
questions.
It was a good
I'll ask
presentation.
him.
Sorry, I missed like half of it.
It's all good.
The
But
guy in the
yeah,
cat.
I'm sure we'll.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I'm driving. I'd go if I was driving.
I'm sure we'll be reaching out with questions.
Kent, would you mind
Thank
riding
you guys
with
for coming. Thank you
this
very
gentleman?
much.
He has some questions. Yeah. And we're going to the same place.
I know my way out there.
Are you sure? Some guy.
I live out there.
I saw you slip $100 bill. He's
Yeah,
taking
really.
me out of town.
You'll be in
That's all I
Colorado.
guess, 100?
Yeah, really.
And we never saw Ken again.
Yeah.
I'm Kevin.
Hey, Kevin, I'm Ken. Let me grab this, and we'll take off.
See y'all later. Yeah.
Are you heading over to Sugar Hills now? Oh, no, you got
No,
your
we got
meeting to
board
go to.
meeting. We got board meeting. Thank you.
Hey,
Good to have you here, man.
yeah, of course.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Both of them should be on here. Hey, you can go.
Thanks, sir. Josh, how do you have everything? Next time I'm out, thank you so much. Appreciate you.